All right. We're at 3:02. I think we're going to hit it. As more people come in, if they do, we'll add them in. I was looking through the names, and I think I know 95% of them. So for the 5% that I don't, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Kathy Almy. I do run Almy Education. So what I do is I'm a consultant, and I have other people that help me, and we work with schools on a variety of math issues. But this is the biggest one: is working on their developmental math programs. But I still teach part-time at Rock Valley College, and that's where I was tenured math faculty for many years. So been in IMAC for a long time and think this is an awesome organization. All right, so we're going to dive in to looking at lessons we've been learning from a particular group. And actually Marcus, I'm sure many of you were at Marcus's session just before this. He mentioned the project that we're going to be talking about, which is called the Aspire Project. So before we dive in, what we're going to do today is just briefly, really super briefly, like I think you guys are pretty familiar with what the law says. That just, so when I'm saying, I don't want to assume that I'm saying something that, you know, if I say DERA, that you'd be like, what the heck is DERA? So DERA is the Developmental Education Reform Act, and it's just one component. It's actually Article 100 of House Bill 2170. And it's what most of us are dealing with. And we're trying to get our colleges in line with, okay? There are some colleges that have to do less, but almost everybody is having to make significant changes to be in alignment with the law. I'm currently working with the Aspire Project. I'm working with 10 colleges, and then there's 2 more community colleges outside of that and a university outside of that. And then I'm working with some others in the state, but there's 13 colleges right now in Illinois that I'm working with on this. So I am well-versed in what the issues that they see. Like, is Connie McLean on here? She is. Connie, I have your email about GPA. I will answer that, I promise. Today's just been nuts. Okay, so the big thing is, we've got to have multiple measures on certain courses, although that's getting expanded beyond that, which is a great thing. You don't have to only do multiple measures on the courses you're required to do. You can do them on more. And we're supposed to maximize the probability that students complete. Now, in the law, it says any college level math course in 2 semesters. That is not what ICCB, they know, and Marcus has said this in the previous meeting, they're not wanting you to sit around and worry about your Calc 2 students. It's the students that are in your stats, your liberal arts math, your college algebra, that's a biggie. These main courses, math for elementary teachers, these are the main courses that we're trying to look at and get students to complete in 2 semesters. All right, so, and a big component of this, and it spells it out in the law, that it can't just be an afterthought. It's supposed to be a key component of your plan, is how are we going to work on closing equity gaps for Black and Latinx students. It specifically says in the law, Black students, but most colleges are treating that as they're whatever minority populations that they serve. And in some colleges, those aren't even minority populations, but still they're trying to better serve those students. Okay, so what are we talking about today? Aspire Project. This is the project that Marcus mentioned. He said some colleges are working with Partnership for College Completion. I've been contracted as technical assistants for math by Women Employed. They are an awesome organization. And I'm not just saying that because they pay me. I've worked with them for years, and before they paid me, I still thought they were an awesome organization. They're great people to work with. Aspire stands for Accelerating Student Progress and Increasing Racial Equity, which is a pretty awesome acronym. I did not come up with it, but whoever did, that was awesome. But basically, this is one of their initiatives, and it involves 10 community colleges in Illinois. So the community colleges, what they get is they each get a certain amount of money, so they can use that for anything they want related to this project on their campus. So they're using them for the funds for a variety of different things. And they also get technical assistance, and we guide them. We're helping them, and we field questions and just keep them moving wherever the schools are, because everybody's at a different place in trying to reform their dev ed. We meet them wherever they're at and help them keep moving forward, get in alignment with this law, and then keep moving forward. Obviously, everybody is really super focused right now on what's due a month from today, which is the plan. However, That's just the beginning. That's not where it stops. That's just the super, super beginning of it. So we're hoping that we will, that Women Employ will get more funding and we'll be able to do another year's worth. They received the funding, I believe. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris Warden is here from Women Employed. You guys received it last March, right? Or you received the approval for the project last March?
Little earlier than that, but you're in the ballpark.
Okay,
Close enough.
There you go. So, and then we started working on it. And this phase, this first phase ends in October of this year, but we're hoping that, that there will be a phase 2. All right, so who's in it? Who's working on this? Here are our 10 Aspire colleges. So anybody that is from one of these colleges, could you just go to the chat and say, I'm here or whatever. So we can see how many of these colleges. And actually, if you want to put your college name, do that. If you're a part of one of these colleges, just type your college's name in the chat and hit enter so we can see who's from them. So Blackhawk, Heartland, Illinois Central, Kaskaskia, Lakeland, Lewis and Clark, Prairie State, Richland, Shawnee, and Waubonsie. Ooh, we've got great representation. That's awesome. Thank you all. We wanted to have schools throughout the state, north to south, and we want to have schools a variety of they're a different part, how they're doing this. They're not necessarily at the same place in it. Like, without question, Lewis and Clark is the farthest amongst all of our colleges. Doesn't mean that they're not still working on things too, but we get a lot of lessons from them because they started working on basically close to what this law requires in 2016. So they're quite a bit ahead of everybody, but it's awesome because we learn all kinds of cool stuff from them. Okay, so these are the colleges. Oh, also we were trying to get different sizes, different geographies, different places in reform, just really have a variety and have diversity of types of campuses. Okay, so I'm just gonna hit it. I started like writing down all the lessons that we've learned and I got too many and I know how I am. So I'm like, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to like shorten it or we're gonna be here all day and we don't have time for that. So I'm gonna try to hit the ones that are the biggest. If you have questions, feel free to, throw something in the chat. I will definitely answer questions. At the end, I'll try to do that. And I also want anybody that's in the Aspire project, if there's something you want to chime in, please do so in the chat, but I'm also going to open it up if you want to share something, you can unmute later on. We'll do that. So what I'm going to try to do is not just give you like, here's all the problems we're seeing. Every problem that I'm going to share with you, I want to share with you a potential solution that we're using so that you can take this and use it on your campus and you can benefit from it. Okay, so here's one. There's nobody in this state that's been sitting around not looking at developmental math. Everybody has done something, okay? So there's no complacency per se, but there's not a ton of progress. So the biggest thing, like I was saying, Lewis and Clark in our group has had the most progress because they are at scale, meaning they don't just have a couple of sections of college algebra, but still have all their, like tons of sections of all of their beginning, intermediate, pre-algebra, all that. They went all in. Now their approach is co-reps. Not everybody is, I don't think so. I don't think we're gonna have every single school doing co-reps, and we certainly don't mandate that they do co-reps. Some projects only want schools that want to do co-reps. Women Employ was very open to like lots of different models of how people want to move forward. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so that's the biggest change that most schools are facing. If you're looking at this going, well, why does there a law? I'm already doing this. It's probably are doing some things. You're probably not at scale. There's very few schools that are. Okay, so meaning the default is not beginning algebra and a placement test. That's where most colleges still are. Okay. Okay, this is another one. There hasn't been a school I've talked to yet in this project or outside of it that hasn't said we're already using multiple measures. However, if we dig, I have found nearly every college can do more with multiple measures, placement, MMP, than they are doing. So if you're wondering, what does that mean? We're not just saying, are you using ACT and SAT and, like AccuPlacer or whatever, but it's, are you using GPA as a measure for all your math courses? And there are you're going to hear me say Lewis and Clark, their class example, their placement chart that has all the way up through calculus. If there's certain GPA plus there's certain things in for calculus. So this came up in the previous session. Are there any conjunctive multiple measures? For the STEM side, there are schools, these are not the courses that are mandated by the state to do multiple measures, but they're still doing them, and they're using GPA plus a grade of some sort in some particular high school math class to ensure that the student has the right background, or enough of the right background so they can be successful. More on that in a second. Let's see, there was something I was going to tell you guys. I'm trying to manage getting people in the room and look at too many things right now. So multiple measures placement. My challenge to you is first off, here's a great test. See how hard it is to figure out how to place in your school it is, because this is one of the things the law says, and I don't know that there's any college that's getting this perfect, but you should try to go navigate your college's website and see how hard is it to figure out how I place into a class. For a lot of colleges, it's not really that clear, and the law says we're supposed to be clearly labeled. It's getting better. Absolutely, colleges are getting better, but most of us are still a little bit more we can do to make it clearer. I'm just going to hit mute all, and that way that way we'll have the background noise, and then we can unmute when we talk later. So my next challenge to you is look at, are you doing GPA? Do you have a GPA that allows students to get into other classes besides Gen Ed Math, Stats, and Math for elementary teachers? Those are the three. I mean, there's one more, elementary math modeling, and quantitative reasoning, but not everybody has that course. But all of those are supposed to, a 3.0 GPA is supposed to allow you in them by the state document that was approved at President's Council. But we can go a lot further with multiple measures and accurately. I don't want you to think like, oh my gosh, we're just opening the doors wide and letting people in that have no business being there. That's not true. We are actually, what we're doing now is closing the doors, but not letting students in where they could with placement tests. GPA is highly predictive of how they will do. So we'll talk about data in a second, because that's what's really cool, is getting to look at other schools' data and what are they learning? What are they seeing? Okay, so this is a big one, okay? A lot of schools, when we first started the project, they were like, we're really struggling to get students to sign up for our co-rec sections. We offer a co-rec, but it doesn't go, or we barely have enough students to get into it. And some schools have that problem and some schools don't, but it's a common one, okay? So here's the issue. The problem is that if you have a foot in both systems, meaning the traditional pre-beginning intermediate algebra system, and then you have this new co-rec system, and students can pick either one, they will always go with the default, or almost always, because it's what they know. It's not necessarily what they like, but it's familiar. Also, your advisors will do the same thing. So if you want students to sign up for co-recs, you need to decide, and this is what I'm always pushing schools, pick a semester to rip off the Band-Aid and go all in. Do not just like tiptoe into this. It makes it really hard to get these classes to fill, and we're all struggling with enrollment. So that's hard for staffing. That's hard for all kinds of things. Our department chairs are working overtime, dealing with a lot of those issues. If you just pick a semester where you're just going to go and really offer some of these things at scale that you're trying, you will have much easier chance of getting students enrolled. You also get a whole lot more data, which will allow you to make iterations much more quickly, because you're going to hear more. Also, one of the things I read in research recently was when we offer these two pathways, or not pathway, these two systems, like the traditional and like the co-rec, the people that end up in the co-rec are usually our middle class to upper class white students. They are not students of color. They tend to go into the traditional courses. And so the very students that we are trying to reduce equity gaps with, they don't end up in these when we just have a section or two of them. So that's another reason for going to scale. Also, it's just better to be simple. It's better to have fewer options, simpler, and not have tons and tons of options. I know this is totally different than what I told you 10 years ago, but that's what we thought 10 years ago, because that's what we knew then. We know more now, and less is better. It's just easier for everybody to get scheduled and where they need to be. Okay, I remember learning this lesson really quick. It's funny, I've been doing reform and dev ed work for 15 years, but I still learn something new all the time. And this was a biggie, because I was like, how do we get to scale? How do we get to scale? We got to get our flow chart set up. Your flow chart is just step one. What are you going to offer? The way you get to scale is you've got to have your courses, you've got to have the placement that's going to put them where they need to be, and you have to offer the sections that allow you to get to scale. So your schedule and your placement are key into getting to scale. It is not enough just to have these certain courses. So that's one of the things that the state wants to see more of, like really going all in with these interventions that have shown to work. So really go all in. That's what I'm saying by scale. Like the default should be for a student that's headed towards an AA, that it's an accelerated option. The default should not be beginning algebra. Okay, whatever your accelerated option is, and it's not always correct, but it often is. Okay, we've done a lot of discussion about how can we get them through to college algebra in 2 semesters. Okay, one of the cool things that I think is so awesome about this is there's lots of ways to do it. Okay, I mean, there's definitely some key things I'm seeing, but then some schools will still come up with other things, which is really nice. So there's not one way to do this, which is good, because you have to flex. One of the things that affects this most is your enrollment and your staffing. And then also what your staff are credentialed to do. That has a big, I've seen that in multiple schools I've worked with, that they can't just pick certain interventions because they may not have the personnel to be able to staff that. So there's a lot that goes into the decisions. Here's the main thing. When you're looking at the 2 semester, so when I say 2 semesters, I don't mean 2 semesters before college algebra. The law says 2 semesters, meaning 1 max of Dev Ed and 1 of a college level math class. Okay, so how do you do 1 semester and then college algebra? You can't just necessarily only change your college algebra or only change what's before it. You need to think about both and how they fit together. And one of the key things is you can do that more readily, and you can make decisions where it's like, okay, we're going to do some of these things in the developmental course and some of these things in the college level course, because you're going to set it up that only people that are in a particular developmental course are going to your college algebra. You're not trying to do a one-size-fits-all Dev Ed like we've done forever, that everybody is going to college algebra. So that was probably clear as mud. But my point is, you need to look at before the college algebra and the college algebra course and how it's all going to fit together, and really your other pathways. So that's one of the key themes I'll show you in a second, that we're seeing a lot with pathways and how that plays into this work. Okay, let's see. This is one recently that's been coming up that's been kind of cool. Obviously, you have all kinds of initiatives and things on your campus. Every campus does, beyond just like tutoring. You know, there's all kinds of different support services that you offer and programs, things like TRIO, things like adult basic ed, things like math labs or math centers. A lot of you have, things like that. We're seeing some schools, and actually we're learning this from the English side of the house, because Aspire is math and English. Our colleges are not just working on math, they're working on both. And we are hearing from English schools that for their very, very lowest learners, they're having them go through adult basic ed. Now, it's not like we're just going to say, oh, everybody at this level, just dump them in adult basic ed. That's not what they're saying. They're saying for the lowest learners, especially ones that have more challenges, they need more support. So some of them are using bridge programs, but they're using them in more prolifically. Some of them are using adult basic ed. And I learned something recently too. Adult basic ed, yes, I'll mention that in just a second, Ryan, about the college algebra. So adult basic ed does not cost the student because the state pays for it. So because we had a question with one of our schools, well, what if some, students can't use financial aid dollars, we heard, for adult basic ed? They don't have to because it doesn't have a charge. So it's just another, to me, it's like you have all these different tools in your toolbox, and that we're going to have to use all different kinds of things to help different populations. There's just not one size fits all. From what I know, yes, adult basic ed is non-credit, but Chris Warden, if you can drop in the chat on that, since you're much more of an expert than I am. I'm still learning about adult basic ed, but I just think it's so cool that that has come up multiple times. And if you want to know, Prairie State with their English department has used it for a while and is having success. So now their math people are considering that, how could we, take advantage of that as well? Okay, so I'm going to go back to what Brian said. He said, the legislation requires, it seems like we've been giving inconsistent information about whether getting college algebra through in 2 semesters is required. You're correct. We have been getting inconsistent. I don't think anybody's trying to be inconsistent. It's just, it's a touchy topic. And because college algebra used to be in the multiple measures placement, it used to be more prevalent in all of these changes and stated as such, but it's a controversial topic. A lot of people have thoughts on it. And so we've pulled back from it a bit in terms of it being stated so clearly. However, Marcus did say this, that's a gateway course to you, then you should be trying to get through in 2 semesters, not 2 semesters before, but 2 semesters, including college algebra. I don't know very many colleges where college algebra isn't a gateway. It just almost nationally, it is considered a gateway course to tons and tons of things. Also, regardless of interpretation, ICCB, and they said this, they want people to try to find ways to get these students through soundly more quickly. If you're not looking at college algebra, I would encourage you to look at it. If there's anything I've learned in all of this work that I've been doing for years with the state and other organizations is legislation begets legislation. And we always know there's more down the pipe. There's more right now, not with Dev Ed, but I mean, there's always more at play. So one of the things I told the schools at one point was, please don't be California, okay? California is a similar state to Illinois in a lot of ways. Lots of community colleges, unionized, and the faculty really did not like their law, which is very similar to our law, this DERA Act, and not all of them went fully in with fidelity. And now they are having more laws and they're getting more mandates and they're getting less and less and less choice in it. So like they don't even get to choose their placement now. It's just they're standard cutoffs. And their plan, when they have to submit it, it's like a 2-page document because there's not that much choice in it. The main thing we've learned in all this work is go with what they are really hoping that we do while we still have a choice, because at some point they'll remove the choice if we don't. So, and then also you have control when you're doing it the way you want to do it. Okay. You can meet the law in totally different ways. And what I love is I don't think there's any of 2 of the 10 colleges in this project that are doing exactly the same thing, which I think is cool. Okay. So, I mean, most of them have co-recs to some extent or will develop them, but everybody's using them differently. And the approaches to college algebra vary. There's a lot of variability in that, which is great. I want that. And the state wants that. There's flexibility, okay? We're not Texas where you have to have 100% in college or co-rec by a particular year. That's what theirs is. And actually, Louisiana last week just mandated all its colleges and universities have to have all co-recs 100% by fall 23. Our law does not say that. So appreciate the flexibility because it does exist. Yeah, just in general. So Tim asked, I heard high school attendance is a large predictor of success in college. I've always heard high school performance, but I'm sure attendance correlates with performance. And so in generally, students that how they do in high school, it directly affects or it's correlated with how they do in college. And that is true for both math and English. So it's not just on the whole, it's also specifically as well. Okay, so here's a biggie. You cannot work too soon on data, and you're not going to look at data the same way. This is one thing that's been interesting, and we're getting ready. We were just having emails about it today. We're going to have a meeting. We have these regular meetings for the Aspire colleges on special topics, and we're going to have one on data collection. Okay, so and I don't want anybody to feel left out, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell you like what the key is, and if you're wanting information, who to talk to. We're going to inundate Dennis's email, which is not the intent, but he's a great expert. So Dennis Krieb is the IR director at Lewis and Clark, and he has presented on it several times in Illinois and outside of Illinois of how they collect their data. They use the national approach, which is emphasizing throughput. So the idea is not just what percentage of students get through this particular course or this particular course. It's if a student starts here, what percentage of them finish? And it could be finish a college level math course, finish a degree, whatever. But it's what's happening over time, not just what's happening individually. So when you do that, your pass rates are going to go down probably individual course-wise. Co-rec pass rates are often lower than the previous pass rates were, but you have fewer semesters, and so you will end up having more students actually get through and finish their math credit. So lower percentages individually, higher overall count of students who will be completing. So it's just a whole different thing. Here's another thing. We're not good at disaggregating data. That's been a real challenge. We've seen that in a lot of the schools. A lot of them, that's just never something. Data is just hard to get. It's just your IR departments are usually overworked. There's too many things going on. They're understaffed, and it's just hard to get data. But I will tell you something that is awesome that I learned last summer is there's some amazing programs that a lot of these colleges have adopted. I think one's called Power BI. I think another one's called like Tableau. There's these different programs that make it much easier once you do like one setup of how you want to look at the data, that you can more easily run what you want and look at it over time much more quickly. It's not this whole huge arduous process every single time you want to look at data. And those programs allow you to go get really specific, like what percentage of 40-year-old white women, if they start in beginning algebra, get through. You can get, you can really disaggregate and get really specific. And if you're wondering, well, we don't have that. I was surprised. We don't talk to our IR departments probably enough. There's a lot of them that have these programs, but they're still learning the best way to take advantage of them. So it's a work in process, but progress. It's a work. Okay, so we talked about that. Also, whatever you pick and you try to do, there's going to be bugs when you do it. I know you probably heard me say that 1,000 times. IR is essential to getting that data so that you know what is working and what is not, so you can tweak. Because this work is not done a month from today when your plan is submitted. It is not done this fall when you pilot something. It just goes. This is not done ever. It's just, we're going to constantly be, not this level of change nonstop, but we're always going to be tweaking and improving things over time. Okay. You've got, the data sometimes is surprising. So one of the things that a lot of faculty struggle with this is just, hearing things like how predictive high school GPA is. Like I read even self-reported high school GPA, which I'm not big on, but it's super predictive too. GPA just tells us a lot on how students are going to do in college. So my thing I would encourage you is to be open to what your data tells you, even if it surprises you. Lewis and Clark, I learned something from them at some point, I'm not sure when, but I thought it was really fascinating. They wanted to see how their students who were not passing co-recs did. So they looked at them, and so I have a note. They found that Black male students with Ds in the co-recs still had more credit accumulation and a greater chance of completion than Black male students who were not in co-recs, who went through the traditional sequence. So I thought that was really interesting, that even students that didn't pass, there was still a benefit to the co-rec. There's still other benefits besides just the content or the credit itself. There's also a lot going on in terms of how the student perceives themselves and their motivation, their engagement. So, we're supposed to be inquisitive about numbers, but we got to be open to what they tell us. And if something's not working, it's not like there's anybody that's got this totally figured out. Nobody does. Lewis and Clark said they're still validating, tweaking, looking at their data all the time. It's not like it's perfect there, but there's just a lot that they have figured out that we can learn from. But they're still working on things too. Everyone is. Okay, this is a biggie. It really helps to have other people that you can talk to. I mean, I think that's why IMAC is so awesome. I've heard many people in English throughout Illinois saying they wish they had an IMAC for English, because we have such a strong community and we can actually talk to each other. We can get a hold of people. Like, I know someone at every college in this state, and even before I started doing a lot of this work, through IMAC, I could find somebody pretty easily. So that's one of the things I would say is, yes, it's nice. We have things where we meet with our 10 schools regularly. We have a Slack channel, which is it's a free messaging channel where we can post updates, we can post links, and people can chat about different things and share information. So like the other day, I was wanting to know, because I'm working with Prairie State, they had questions about their implementation of multiple measures. Well, they're using Ellucian Colleague. Well, I need to know who else is using Ellucian Colleague, because some of our schools are banner schools, some of them are PeopleSoft schools. And so like I was able to go into Slack and say, just tell me what your student record system is. And now, and Chris, I will show you this since I can see you. I've got my list right on my paper. I've got all my schools that are banner, PeopleSoft, Ellucian, and now we can more easily get them together and not invent the wheel. Okay, because some of these schools have already done the programming and figured out how to make this stuff work. Let's learn from them. Okay, so I guess my request for that would be, and I don't know, we have Mike is on. I don't know if we have Dan, probably not. He might be presenting, but it would be cool if we could have, or maybe it's just the IMAC Facebook page. I think it would be great if we could have a place where IMAC faculty or any math faculty in Illinois could have a place like the Slack channel that we have, but be for anybody in IMAC that could talk about these things and crowdsource more information. Also, if you're like, well, that's not going to happen today, Kathy, now what? There's so much research that did not exist even 5 years ago. So if you're willing to go online and do some Googling, it's amazing. And I'll narrow your Googling for you. The states that have done the biggest transformations of these and have the most documentations would be California, Texas, Florida, North Carolina. New York has some, and I'm trying to think of ones where it's like statewide. Tennessee's done a lot, but you know, I remember saying this to Brian Durham years ago at an IMAC conference. We're not Tennessee, and we're not. I mean, we don't have a board of regents that just decides something and everybody has to do it. And we're unionized, their faculty or not. So that's why I often look to California, because their situation is more similar to ours. Reform, but in a structure, an employment structure, how we employ faculty. So feel free to learn from other people and not have to try to always think you have to be the pilot. In fact, one of the main things, if you get nothing from this session but this, I want you to leave and realize someone has probably piloted what you're looking at before you, and it's great to go do a little bit of research and find out, and instead of worrying, is this going to work? Probably someone has done it. Okay, this is a really biggie. This comes up all the time, and so I want to emphasize this to you. It's super important to be thinking about the STEM and non-STEM aspect, which I know, like I saw Brian Mercer's on here, and he and I have done work with Pathways. Yeah, Brian's on there. Hi, Brian. So we've done work with Pathways and the whole idea of non-STEM and STEM since like 2010, 2011. It's been a minute. But I'm doing more, I'm saying more than that. Okay, so here's what I want to give you an example. This is from Lakeland, and this is on their website. So if you're like, ooh, I want to see that, okay, you can literally Google Lakeland College math pathways. And this is one of 4 pathways flowcharts they have. So they're really trying to get students broadly to think, it's called a meta major, but broadly to think, where do I think I'm headed? I mean, they may not know exactly where they're headed, but they might know I'm not headed towards STEM, or they might know I'm definitely headed towards health career. They might know that. And so what they do is they group by their requirements. They have these math pathway charts. They don't have the whole sequence the students have to look at. They just have to look at the part that applies to them. Lewis and Clark does a version of this as well. They graphically organize it differently, but they are big on, because I just got their pathways chart the other day. They have a handout that their advisors are regularly like asking students, what is your path? Let's pick one. And if you don't know, we try to get them on something that's headed towards an AA, because we can at least try to get them a college credit, build some momentum, and get them in through like a gen ed math class or a statistics course. They're not necessarily going to pass, but their chances are much higher than some of the other ones. Also, you should find out, and you may already know, but if you don't know, find out if your campus is doing any work with guided pathways. That's a national reform approach that fits in with DevEd reform. There is a lot of colleges that are doing guided pathways work, but not necessarily does everybody in the college know they're doing that. If that's the case, you can probably, talk to them, learn some things, again, crowdsource some knowledge and not have to start from scratch with everything, because they may have been doing things that will help you be able to, start getting students thinking about just like generally where you want to go, then we'll pick your math class. Not just like, this is what you think your math class is. It's like, we're having a direction. Oh, I also want to mention something that Lakeland does, which I think is really interesting. On their non-STEM side, the way they do co-recs is if you're going to take gen ed math or stats, you either start in it, so you can see this. I think I'll have to check with Bambi. I don't know that Bambi's not on here, but I'll have to check with Bambi. But I don't know that they offer their math literacy anymore. From what they've told me, so yeah, and this is 2019. So I mean, it's a couple years old, but this is what they had most recently on their website. But it's pretty much you start in the college level course or you start in the co-rec if you're non-STEM. They don't have pre-algebra. They don't have anything below that. They don't have building up to it. And guess what? They get them through. And they're not dumbing their standards down or anything like that. They're just, those courses are well suited to, working, helping students because they're having to brush up on things just in time. So not every school's doing that. We saw plenty of schools that are going to keep a little bit of dev ed, or they're going to have, I think all of them have dev ed in some way. So just like Marcus said, no one's getting rid of it and eliminating it. But for these students, they don't make them take any dev ed. It's basically you're in the course or you're in the co-rec. Now for college level, for college algebra, it's different. So they're working on their college algebra pathway, which will not be like that. There will be something below it. Okay, thank you, Sarah. I totally forgot you were there as well. Thank you. And Sarah said they do not offer Math 008 anymore. Awesome. Okay, so this is one that's probably goes with, obvious, but maybe not. So it's worth saying. When you start working on anything with math, you're going to impact almost everybody in your campus. So, and this comes up in a variety of different ways we see with schools where they're dealing with another department or trying to address something that placement or testing or records has an issue with making these changes. Like your IR people are going to be impacted, your IT, your programmers, your records people. A lot of schools, when they go to multiple measures, you change the default from being everybody take a placement test. Okay, well then how do you get students started? If you're not taking a placement test, how are you getting that GPA? Like what are the steps that you're actually doing? Like do you have a survey? Does someone look at a transcript? Like, so we've been getting down on the more granular things like that. Like how do you actually deal with that? And what are some schools doing to deal with that? But one thing, if you haven't done this yet, it's helpful to make a list. You could have someone in the person that usually manages everything for your curriculum committee, that manages all the documents that go to the state and go in your catalog and everything. They could do a search for you, or you can do a find, Control F search in your college catalog. But it's good to figure out all the courses and programs that have developmental math requirements, as well as potentially college algebra and stats if you're going to be, and gen ed math if you're going to be fiddling with those courses. Just so you can give them a heads up that you're making a change so that they know, because there can be issues. It's not like they're not fixable, but it's good to let them know what's going on, because we really are like math, like we're at the root and like everybody else is like impacted us by some way. Okay, this was one of the things we were just before this, we were having one of these meetings that we have regularly, a special topics meeting. It was on the equity work, because the plan requires you to talk about how you're going to work on shrinking equity. And the moral of the story is it's like really complicated and it's not simple. And it's certainly not something you're going to do one change and be done with. So things that we learned just today, things that I learned, that I love this. So I did, Chris, I did a screen grab while we were doing that session because I loved it so much. But it's like, if you want to get to equity, we had 2 researchers from the Community College Research Center, although one has left, but that's where they worked and have done a ton of research. They've done a lot of research on equity and equity gaps in Dev Ed, and looked at what colleges are doing that's working or not working. And the thing that they said, and the thing that I've seen in the papers that I've read, is you have to do structural things like we're talking about with like placement and like co-recs and things like that. But that is not where you end. You have to keep going, and it has to be a holistic approach that your campus is committed to. Otherwise, it will not actually happen. We will not actually reduce equity gaps. So meaning things have to happen at the classroom level, student services, how do we greet students? I don't mean saying hi, but I'm saying like, how do they come to our campus, and what is it that they experience when they come to our campus? So we're not going to fix that in 3 months. I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying that's one that it's like, it's an ongoing thing, and it's not a simple thing, but it's worth working on. Okay. This just came up this week, so it made me think about it. Our schools, we're seeing them, they're working on writing up their plans that are due May 1st, like all of you guys are. And then you're going to quickly be implementing, because you got to figure out, okay, am I going to start doing this? When are we going to start rolling things out? It gets a whole lot stickier when you actually start working on implementation, then, because it's not in theory, it's in practice, and it involves other areas and other people. So one of the classic cases, this is why I wrote the comment, I don't know if some of you may have seen this in the previous session, when Marcus talked about a multiple measures, what did he call it? Call it portal or something. They're looking at some kind of database. I think it was a portal, yeah, that they were going to, the state is working on something where we will be able to get data from the high schools, and then the colleges have access to that. That would be amazing, because that's one of the hardest things that the schools that we're working with are working on, is dealing with multiple measures. In theory, it works great. In practice, it's usually expensive and time consuming. It's worth it, but you have to often convince people. Like some schools are like, we just have someone that looks at all the transcripts. Other people are like, how can we program this? How can we get data more easily from our high schools? Lots of ways to address it. So if they get that portal going, oh my gosh. Because we actually, when I was working at the state level, we were talking about something like that years ago, but it got kind of tabled with other work and then COVID and everything else. So I'm so happy to hear they're still working on that. That's awesome. Oh, another issue that comes up regularly that we see this with schools is like their registration systems, linking their co-rec and their college level sections. Some of our schools, and I think Lakeland is one of these, and I think College Lake County isn't in this group, but they do this as well. They don't always have a course plus another one as a co-rec. Sometimes they add a lab hour, or sometimes they just make a course with more credit hours, so students don't have to sign up for 2 things. But linking courses in these registration systems is usually, it's not impossible, but it usually has some bugs when you're trying to do it. All right. Flap my gums a bunch. All right, so if you are at Aspire College, and hopefully you can unmute. If you can't, let me know and I will unmute you. So I think you can. But anyone, I'm just curious, like, what is something you've learned from being in this project, or what's something that someone else here who's not in it that they could benefit from what you've learned?
I don't even know where to begin. There's so much. I mean, like you say, there's so much happening all at the same time. But the flow chart, I think, is really important, because you have to really plan like what classes are going to lead to what classes. And it takes time. And, we've been working on it and fiddling with it for months.
Mm-hmm.
So that we haven't started the pathway part yet.
We'll be talking about that in the very near future, Roberta. So.
It has helped tremendously to look at what other schools have done.
Yeah.
It's helped tremendously to work with Kathy, because you can ask a question and she'll look it up or answer it for you. There's so many questions as you go through this, and it takes time. I guess that's the other thing. You're not going to sit down and plan this out in a meeting. Like, you're going to keep fiddling with it. And you change one thing and then something else has to change. So we're challenged because we're such a small school. We have 3 full-time math faculty. And so we often teach like there's one class going of that class that semester, you know, and it's challenging because of that. So like we can't offer a lot of options. They're either, you know, so someone else say something now.
That was awesome though, Roberta. Thank you.
I could speak up about it. One of the things I would say is really work with your advisors. The more that the advisors know and have participated, the more excited they are about everything. And one of the questions I even asked them was, well, should we offer this or this? And they said, streamline it, streamline it. And so we've been working on the placement document. We've been working on pathways, on flowcharts. I won't tell you how many drafts we're up to at this point, but you know, I'll send it off to an advisor and they'll catch a mistake. Well, let's catch it now, you know, and fill those gaps. And so, and then what we did is we did run a couple of the courses for the stats and the gen ed math. We had some co-requisites we were already running during COVID days. And so that's been good. That's going to scale. And then we're piloting a college algebra, which will eventually go to scale as well. So I would just say really include your advisors. And I got a comment this week from the advisors. Thank you so much for including us. But we're seeing, you know, the enrollment's not horrible in those co-requisite courses. And I think that's because our advisors are really excited about it.
Yeah, where they are affected, because there's some schools that have no issue with getting enrollment in it, and their advisors are usually one of the key components of getting enrollment in there.
We also have an advisor that attends all our math department meetings, so that helps.
Oh, wow.
A good resource for us.
That's fantastic.
I forgot. I also wanted to add, you got to get your data person involved right away because you got to track out everybody.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking how many schools. So anybody in here from Rock Valley? I know we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but we got to get the IR people. We got to get them included. Anyone else, or like Chris Warden from when employed us here? I don't know if there's anything you wanted to share, but just, you know, anything you guys want to share about it. Because we're trying to, I mean, it's not like we're like, oh, we're in a club and you're not. I don't want anybody to feel that way. It's like, yes, we learn things and we want to make that information available. And I will also do a shameless plug. Other schools bring me in besides the Aspire schools. So if you're looking for help, let me know. There's my email. So that was terrible. All right. So Chris, was there anything you wanted to add?
I think the only thing I would add, and you've touched on this in a number of your different learnings, and it's where Women Employed comes from in this respect, is that the experts are the people doing the work. So there are times like today when we bring in national researchers because we want a sense of what's going on in other places in the country. But I don't think there has been, other than racial equity, which we are all trying to unlock and get our hands around, I don't think there's a single question that's come up in the Aspire project that somebody on one of those 10 campuses not only can answer, but has experience in the field doing what it is we're asking about. So can help us and the other campuses think through how to make progress in that area.
That's awesome. And I know, Mike, you said something about, Mike, if people have questions, we generally do it as an email if someone has a question. I just want to put that bug in your head. If there's any way that we could do some kind of like shared, just like discussion board or Slack channel or Facebook or something, so that, because IMAC faculty do know each other pretty well. And I know that they're always emailing around, because again, I don't want you to leave this going, okay, well, that's great for them, but what about us? If you need help right now, I want you to be able to tap into the knowledge of other people in the state.
Yeah, we can. I'll bring that up too with our web people, and maybe that's something we can add into the website. Maybe that's something we can like add into social media. Like I said, mostly when someone has a question, and Brian Mercer has done this a ton, is they just email just a ton of people through IMAC by doing it through sort of the email group through the webpage, and they just ask the blanket question and then anyone can answer. That's somewhat effective, but you're probably not hitting everybody doing it that way. So that's why doing it as more maybe as a discussion board area or something like that, or like the example you gave would probably be better. We'll bring that up. at the next board meeting. I also wanted to point out, since you called me out, that me and Ellen Field are going to be hosting the roundtable next Friday about DARA, and this gives everybody a chance to talk about what they are doing. I'm also going to be showing those templates that Marcus Brown brought up. Your school should have them. I do have a copy of those, and the actual form that you're supposed to write that's due on May 1st. So we will be showing those next Wednesday. So there's a little bit of plug for next Wednesday's breakout session for us. Thanks.
I'm so
Kathy.
glad you mentioned that. Yes, I will be there, guys. Please come. And what time is it next week?
That's at 3 p.m.
Oh, so same as this. So
Yep.
3 p.m. again? Dead. Oh, and I am, someone asked, I am recording this, and I will make the, I mean, evidently, I forgot that we gave our own Zoom links. So I have the video and I can share it with anybody that wants it. So that's nice, if that helps. All right, any other questions?
I think you're going to put it to the cloud, and I think Dan is going to edit all of them and put them up on YouTube, I believe.
You are correct. He is.
Yeah.
Yes, he did say that today. All right. Anything else before we let you go to whatever's next? I think we have curriculum committee amongst probably other things. Anyone, Bueller? All right, here's my email. You've got it. If you think of something, you just want to ask me a question, you're like, I missed this, or I'd love to know what you're talking about there. Thanks, Heidi. Please, shoot me an email if you need something. And otherwise, thank you so much for coming. We had a great turnout. So let's all go to Mike's next week. See you then.